The goal here is to scare white people.
It's very much an emotional ad, and it really hits viewers right in the gut.
Welcome to Political Experts React, where we break down political ads in media, explain what people behind them are trying to accomplish, and decide whether or not they did a good job. I'm Dan Pfeiffer, former communications director for President Barack Obama. Joining me today is Kevin Kruse, professor of history at Princeton University, whose latest book, Myth America, sets the record straight on the biggest legends and lies about our past. Kevin Kruse, welcome to Political Experts React.
Pleasure to be here.
This is a unique episode of the show. Normally, we focus on campaign ads that are running in real time in this campaign. This time, we're going to look back at history. So we have brought on an actual expert to this fake expert show. So thank you for being here. The first ad we're going to start with is, I think, perhaps the most famous of all political ads, the Daisy ad from 1964.
These are the stakes to make a world in which all of God's children can live, or to go into the dark. We must either love each other or we must die.
Vote for President Johnson on November 3rd. The stakes are too high for you to stay home.
So very little subtle about that ad.
No.
Could you give us a little context for that ad and perhaps why it's considered such a famous political ad?
Well, it's a famous political ad, and it's, the lore around it is it only aired once, right? But it did enough in that one airing to get people to talk about what was going on in the ad and the themes that it was reaching out for. It's remarkable in a lot of ways. It never once mentions Goldwater. It just assumed people would know things about him. And I think most importantly, it steers into what the Johnson campaign's biggest attack on Goldwater was that he was a loose cannon, right? He had joked about, let's lob an atomic bomb into the men's room of the Kremlin. He floated the idea of letting NATO commanders in the field be authorized to use nuclear weapons on their own accord. And so this is a theme of the campaign, that he was dangerous, right? Goldwater had a famous motto of, "In your heart, you know he's right." And Democrats tweaked that to, "In your heart, you know he might." Or more crudely, "In your guts, you know he's nuts." But with all those mottos, it was really enough to show that he was reckless and dangerous and was just beyond the pale, right? And so the ad cuts right to that. It's very much an emotional ad. It starts off with this little girl. We immediately move to these scenes of nuclear Armageddon, and it really hits viewers right in the gut. But most importantly, it put that issue of, is Goldwater too dangerous, became the topic of conversation of the campaign.
I think it's so fascinating that this ad only aired once, because that has become a trick in the tool bag of every campaign since then, which is put out this viral ad, get the press to cover it, get a bunch of free attention. But they could have run that ad once, run that ad 0 times, run that ad a gazillion times, and LBJ still would have won by a lot, since that was one of the largest landslides in history. So it's not the ad. Sometimes we think the ad is sort of the thing that wins the race, when it's really the story that leads to the ad that wins the race. The idea that Johnson was a very strong incumbent running at the exact right time on a pretty successful record. But it's also, I think, says something about the lack of innovation and creativity in political ads, that the most famous, most notoriously devastating ad was made in 1964. And there aren't a ton that are seen to have improved upon that. Okay. The next ad we're going to look at is probably the most famous positive Republican ad, Ronald Reagan's Morning in America ad.
It's morning again in America. Today, more men and women will go to work than ever before in our country's history. With interest rates and inflation down, more people are buying new homes, and our new families can have confidence in the future. America today is prouder and stronger and better. Why would we want to return to where we were less than 4 short years ago?
For our viewers who may not have been around for the 1984 campaign, which is more and more every day, this is Reagan running for re-election against Walter Mondale. Could you help maybe put this ad in context, both for that election and how sort of Reagan or Reaganism began to dominate Republican messaging in politics.
Yeah. Communications was something that Reagan was really big on. His White House, I think more than anyone before, and maybe even since, really was good about clarifying what their message of the day was. It would have an image of the day, it would have a soundbite of the day, and they really wanted to get that across. And so they were kind of masters of playing to the media and building to what were Reagan's own strengths as a former actor, as the great communicator. And so ads like this were ones that kind of fit in a larger a palette of what they were doing. What's really remarkable about this is the ad is premised on, aren't you better off now than you were 4 years ago? And it glosses over the middle part of Reagan's first term, where the economy bottomed out. Unemployment shot up from what it had been under Carter. It was, over 10%. He gets hammered in the midterms in 82, and it's really bad all the way through 83. And it had turned a corner then in 84. But what the ad does is it kind of erases all that trouble that Reagan had overseen and all the real economic backlash to his early policies, and instead just posits there's 1980, there's 1984, and those are the 2 points to compare, right? It's very much a gauzy, kind of soft focus, feel-good scenes of Americana. And that fit with Reagan's policies and personality, right? To kind of present things in as feel-good a way as humanly possible.
Ronald Reagan and his White House staff and his campaign team were the first ones, I think, who fully understood the modern media and the interaction between media and politics and how storytelling is told. And what they do in this ad, which is the goal of every campaign, figure out what the singular question is that you want voters to be asking themselves when they vote, and then raise that question to the top of mind by the time the election comes. And they were so effective with the question of, are you better off? That has become the question that gets asked by the media, by pundits in every subsequent re-election campaign. It's an incredibly effective ad, and I think maybe the first truly modern political ad that you could run that, like, with obviously updating for images and technology, but you could run that, like, that could be, if political conditions change dramatically, that would be an ad that Joe Biden would run against Donald Trump, where they go again.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
As you could probably tell, there were so many ads to look at that we actually had to break down 4 ads this episode instead of the usual 3. So you were getting a free ad. If you like this historically focused episode, then show us. And how can you show us? Hit the like button, share the video, leave a comment, and of course, and I am professionally obligated to say this, subscribe to this channel. And if enough people do that, we may have to do another. I know, don't threaten you with a good time. Smash the subscribe button. Thank you so much. Okay, next ad. This is probably the most infamous negative campaign ad in history. This is the Willie Horton ad that was run in support of George H.W. Bush's election against Massachusetts Governor Michael Dukakis.
Bush and Dukakis on crime. Bush supports the death penalty for first-degree murderers. Dukakis not only opposes the death penalty, he allowed first-degree murderers to have weekend passes from prison. One was Willie Horton, who murdered a boy in a robbery, stabbing him 19 times. Despite a life sentence, Horton received 10 weekend passes from prison. Horton fled, kidnapped a young couple, stabbing the man and repeatedly raping his girlfriend. Weekend prison passes. Dukakis on crime.
This is an ad that is so infamously racist that every racist ad since then has been called a Willie Horton ad.
Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about the context in which this happened and sort of the legacy of this ad.
Well, the context is, and first of all, for starters, the contrast between this and the one before couldn't be starker. That one before is gorgeous, it's sweet, it's got all soft colors and nice music. This looks like it was, put together by the AV club at a local high school. It has not really stood up in terms of the style or the tone of it.
Yeah, it's real like Apple IIc vibes, right?
Yeah. I mean, I show this to my students these days, and they're stunned that this was a major ad. Even though this was, if I remember right, this was done by a satellite group, not by the campaign itself.
Yeah, it's a PAC supported by Lee Atwater. Yeah.
So Lee Atwater said, "Oh, we don't have a Willie Horton ad," right, and denied it in front of the press. But they had a Willie Horton ad, but it fits into Lee Atwater's approach, right? Lee Atwater was many things. One of them, though, was he was a huge fan of pro wrestling, and one of his geniuses as a campaign manager was he knew how to take the storylines, the broad storylines from pro wrestling. You got to have a hero, you got to have a heel, and you want your candidate to be the hero, you want the other candidate to be the heel, and he moved that into the world of campaigning and ad making. And this is one that really does turn Dukakis into the heel. And a lot of it is unfair. The furlough program wasn't something Dukakis started. It was in fact started by his Republican predecessor. The furlough program there, I believe, was modeled on one in the state of California, introduced by Governor Ronald Reagan. There's kind of a remarkable irony that they're hanging Dukakis out to dry for this policy. But Atwater had said, he was going to make Willie Horton into his running mate, right? And so they elevate this. Even the idea of Willie Horton, if I'm remembering right, he actually went by William Horton. Willie was something that they coined to make him sound more dangerous, right? So all these things are a very cynical, very dirty way to twist the truth, to play to racial fears. And so the Bush campaign is playing to emotion, playing to the darker emotions, and the Democrats had no real response for this. And so it was devastating.
There are a lot of ads that we looked at on this show in the 2020 race that were about crime that are basically just a more modern version of this. There was the Trump ad of the woman calling 911 and not getting an answer because the police were defunded.
Leave a message and we'll get back to you as soon as we can.
One thing that I think is important is that crime is a proxy for race and racial fear in Republican messaging. And this is the most sort of maybe obvious of it until Donald Trump comes onto the stage and just says all the quiet parts out loud. It wasn't like after Willie Horton, everyone started being more responsible about racial fear mongering, and then we got to Trump. Because what happens is in 2001, 9/11 happens, and the Bush campaign simply switches the old playbook from immigrants and Black Americans to Muslims. And then there is the slightly less infamous ad, but very notable ad, the Wolves ad, where the Wolves are chasing Kerry about terrorism. We're on a trajectory here, and things are not getting better. They're getting worse, which I think is notable and why it's important to still talk about this ad. This is the last ad we're going to look at. This is the America the Beautiful ad against Mitt Romney.
I'm Barack Obama, and I approve this message.
Oh, beautiful for spacious skies, for amber waves of grain, for purple mountains' majesty above the fruited plain. America, America, God shed his grace on thee and crown thy good with...
Your reaction to this ad, Kevin?
It's incredibly effective. First of all, it's well made. The slight weirdness of Mitt Romney, the singing there, he's a little corny, and you kind of push that just a little bit with the singing, right? What I really appreciate about it are the headlines or the lines from these news sources put up in clear, simple font, right? A little bit at a time, it drips out and it underscores this message. And I think here the ground was paved by the fact that it was, Newt Gingrich had opened up the kind of the Bain Capital attacks on Romney in the primaries. So it was maybe seen as fair game by this point, that even Republicans have attacked Romney for this. But it shows that it's such a powerful theme, right? These kind of class lines very much fit in with a traditional Democratic argument. And so it's an easy thing, I think, to pitch Democratic voters because they already half believe what's being told to them, right? You're not trying to move them into a new direction. You're just kind of giving them ammo for something that they already believe. And that's what a lot of effective ads really do. If that election had been a simple up or down referendum on the economy, Obama was going to lose. Because Romney, for as many flaws as a candidate, many of them show up in that ad, was he had business cred and was sort of a generic Republican. And generic Republican was going to beat Obama in that race. And the last line of that ad is Romney's the problem, not the solution, which is us acknowledging the economy is a problem, and that you're not deciding whether Obama solved it or not, you're deciding who is going to do a better job of taking it from here. As we talked about before, re-election ads are a referendum on the incumbent, right? And what that ad does in that framing is it turns around and it says, actually, is Romney the right guy for this crisis now, right? What's a referendum on him? The other thing that I think is notable about this messaging is Obama did quite well relative to every Democrat since with rural working class voters. And it was in part because of this economic populist message. And this ad also only ran a few times, but that's, I think, one theme of these ads is the best ads are seen by a lot of people beyond the people the campaign pays to show it to. Right. Kevin, thank you so much for joining us on Political Experts React. Huge fan of yours. Everyone go buy his book. Very much looking forward to reading it myself. Hey, thanks for having me. Real pleasure. And a huge fan of yours too. So great to be here and do this. Thanks for watching these ads and videos with us. If you have anything you'd like us to break down next time, please let us know in the comments. See you all later.